Hello everyone, and welcome to Grade 8 History, Extended Writing, adapted for Grade 8 students. This lesson is to help you prepare for your formal assessment in the history syllabus of World War I. Before we begin, we first need to understand what is extended writing. And basically it's paragraphs. You're going to be required to write a short essay. Extended writing is when a student is expected to produce a piece of independent writing without the help of an adult within a set time frame. So usually under test conditions. It is extended writing that occurs at the end of a teaching unit. So we will usually only do this type of task once you have finished a section of work. The purpose is to test your knowledge and your understanding of the topic. For extended writing in grade 8, you will be expected to answer a main question or topic. This main question or topic will be divided into 3 sub-questions or 3 subtopics. Each of the sub-questions or subtopics will be a separate paragraph. So in the end, you will write an introduction, your 3 paragraphs, and a conclusion. When all the paragraphs are combined, it should answer the main question. So how do you write your essay? What does an essay include? An essay is a formal piece of writing focusing on a topic. History essays focus primarily on past events and make a judgment based on the topic or question you are responding to. The basic formula for your essay will include an introduction, 3 paragraphs, and a conclusion. So let's start with an introduction. How to write an introduction. An essay must have an introductory paragraph that lets your reader know what your main question or topic is and what the 3 paragraphs of your essay will be about. You will then need to write your paragraphs. Your paragraphs contain your response to a certain question, i.e. your sub-question or your subtopic. The paragraphs contain evidence and facts written in a story-like way. At the end of each paragraph, you must link it back to the sub-question or the subtopic. If this sounds confusing, don't worry. We're going to go through an example together later in the video. At the end of your essay, you must always have a conclusion. A conclusion is a summary of your writing. And you're not allowed to put any new information in your conclusion. But you're very lucky in grade 8, because in grade 8 your conclusion is not complicated when it comes to extended writing. All you need to do is state what the main question or topic is and how each of the sub-questions or subtopics helped you to answer the main question. Again, don't panic. We will go through an example together. So how are you going to remember the basics when writing an extended essay in grade 8? Well, you're going to use the peel method, of course. So how does the Peel method apply to your essay? Well, first of all, there's the point. This would be the topic that you are answering, or the topic of the sub-question that you are answering. You would then have the explanation. So you take your sub-question or subtopic, and your explanation will provide the context of where your information fits in. After you have provided context, you will then need to provide some evidence. This would be the facts that you believe is relevant to help you answer the sub-question or the subtopic. And once you've written all that, you will then link it back. You take your reader back to the topic, to the sub-question. At this level, it can be one sentence. So let us do an example together. Your main question in the assessment was discuss the realities of World War I. You were then told that your subtopics were explain the life of a soldier living in the trenches, consider the physical conditions as well as soldier morale. Your second subtopic was discuss how the infantry were the backbone of the army. And finally, comment on how World War I changed the technologies developed for war out at sea and in the air. As you can see, the three subtopics actually help you answer to discuss the realities of World War I. The first thing you need to do is think about your introduction. Remember, this is where you let the reader know what your essay is going to be about. So for example, I could write, in the following essay, I will discuss some of the realities of World War I. So there you go. I have identified the main topic. To help me address this topic, I will be focusing on three main sections. That being the life of a soldier living in the trenches, including the physical conditions and soldier morale. I have now mentioned subtopic 1. I will also be focusing on how the infantry were the backbone of the army. I have now mentioned subtopic 2, as well as how World War I changed the technologies developed for war out at sea and in the air. Subtopic 3. Now, when you write your introduction, you would not write any of the parts that are in red. So when your reader reads it, it would flow like so. In the following essay, I will discuss some of the realities of World War I. To help me address this topic, I will be focusing on three main sections. That being the life of a soldier living in the trenches, including the physical conditions and soldier morale. I will also be focusing on how the infantry were the backbone of the army, as well as how World War I changed the technologies developed for war out at sea and in the air. So now we look at sub-question topic 1. To understand the realities of World War I, we need to look at the life of a soldier living in the trenches and consider the physical conditions as well as soldier morale. So there's the point. I have identified the point of this paragraph. The most obvious feature of the Western Front was the system of trenches. They began as simple shelters by 1915. They had developed into complex defensive systems. I've given an explanation. Where are the soldiers? What is the context? I've mentioned the Western Front. I've mentioned a year, placing it in a contextual time in history. Soldiers on the Western Front went through an enormous range of experiences, from extreme boredom to the appalling stress of an enemy bombardment or attack. People often think that the soldiers in the trenches spent all their time going over the top, attacking enemy trenches. In fact, such attacks were an exception rather than the rule. Soldiers spent much more time on guard, repairing trenches, or just resting or sleeping. And so I have the evidence that has addressed the first part of the topic, which said what was the life of a soldier living in the trenches. I now address the second part, the physical conditions. The weather had a marked effect on soldiers' lives. In summer, the trenches were hot, dusty, and smelly due to the rotting corpses, sewage, and unwashed soldiers. The soldiers were also infested with lice, or chats as they called them. In wet weather, soldiers spent much time up to their ankles in water. Many thousands suffered from trench foot caused by standing in water for hours or days. There was little protection from the cold, and many soldiers got frostbite. To add to all these unpleasant problems, the trenches were infested with rats. These corpse rats fed off the dead bodies and garbage created by the armies, and some account speaks of cats and dogs being killed by these rats. You see, so now I've provided that evidence. Despite all this, the trenches seem to have generated a tremendous sense of camaraderie, friendship between soldiers. They were united against the unpleasant conditions and dangers of war that they faced daily for years. They were aware that death or injury could occur at any moment due to artillery bombardment or sniper fire. And so I have provided evidence for soldier morale. And the last thing I need to do is link it. And so now one can have a better understanding of the life of a soldier that was living in the trenches during World War I. So if you look at the red sections in this paragraph, I'm highlighting for you the Peel method. I've started with the point, I've provided an explanation and context. I've then looked at the question, what evidence was needed? I needed evidence of life of a soldier. I needed evidence of physical conditions, and I needed evidence of soldier morale. And finally, I linked it at the end. You would then write your second paragraph, which would be your sub-question or topic 2. Remember, you first need the point. You need to let the reader know what the point is. So my point would be, the key players or backbone to World War I were the infantry. Now I need to give an explanation, provide context. So, these were the foot soldiers who went to fight for their country during the war. Before the war, the theory was that an attack on the enemy would be led by cavalry charge. Now I need to provide some evidence. The infantry's job was to follow the cavalry and take charge of the captured positions. These tactics had to change due to the stalemate, and so the infantry, rather than the cavalry, led the attacks. The infantry charge remained the battle tactic used throughout the war. The generals thought that if they did it often enough, with enough men, eventually it would wear down the enemy, and they could break through. Due to heavy censorship of letters and newspapers, the families back home were largely unaware of what the soldiers were facing. And then, because you're in grade 8, you just need to link it. And so, this made the infantry or foot soldiers a vital part of World War I. And finally, you address the third topic. World War I changed the technologies developed for war out at sea and in the air. I have now shown that that is the point of this section of the essay. The range and power of the warring nations' naval fleets, along with their ambition to control the world's waterways, were major reasons that World War I spread so quickly. I have now provided context. I've given the reader an explanation that we are now discussing at sea. Naval warfare had always been unpredictable because of the role of the weather and other factors. But new technologies made it even more so. Mines, torpedoes, and submarines introduced new threats that made even the greatest warships vulnerable. Compared to giant dreadnoughts, which took years to build and were manned by hundreds of men, submarines were cheap and generally used a crew of fewer than 2 dozen. Mines were cheaper still, and once laid, required no crew at all. In World War I, naval power was more often used to maintain control of trade routes than to capture new territory. As it turned out, Great sea battles between large surface fleets were rare in the war. Instead, the submarine came to own the seas, and Germany became the undisputed master at employing this new technology. So there I have provided evidence on how World War I changed technology for war out at sea. But remember, this topic had 2 sections. And so I need to provide the context for the next section. In the summer of 1914, the aeroplane was less than 11 years old. Aviation was a fledgling technology that fascinated many, but still generated skepticism when it came to practical applications. So now I'm letting the reader know that on the main point, I'm now looking at technology developed in the air. Most aeroplanes of the time were slow, flimsy contraptions with barely enough power to lift a single pilot and perhaps 1 passenger. World War I itself encouraged the rapid improvement of the aeroplane, both in general and specifically as a weapon. During the 4 years of conflict, the overall stability and safety of flying improved tremendously, as did the power, speed, and maneuverability of the newest designs. Moreover, the war fostered the general public's respect for aviation and spawned a new generation of pilots and aircraft designers who would go on to take human flight to the next level after the war. And so here I have provided the evidence needed on how World War I changed the technologies developed in the air. And now my final sentence to link it. And so, World War I changed the technologies developed for war out at sea and in the air. And finally, you have your conclusion. Now remember, in grade 8, your conclusion is not complicated. You need to restate the main topic or the question, and then you need to remind the reader what the sub-questions were. And so it would read as follows. The realities of World War I influenced the life of a soldier living in the trenches, which involved some terrible physical conditions, but did manage to have a positive influence on soldier morale. The infantry remained the backbone of the army, even though World War I changed the technologies developed for war out at sea and in the air. You could also start with "in conclusion," but that is entirely up to you. Some things you need to remember. When you complete your formal assessment, you will be writing all the needed information as one essay. You do not use subheadings. For example, you do not write what the topic is. Your marker or the reader of your essay should know what each paragraph is about as you explain the point at the beginning of the paragraph and provide the explanation and context. You will have your introduction, your 3 paragraphs, and your conclusion. Do not forget the Peel method. Do not forget that you need to have your position, your point. What is the point of this topic? Do not forget to provide your explanation and context. Remember your evidence and then do the final linking sentence. So how is your essay marked? Your essay is marked using a rubric. The person marking your essay will check that you have met all the criteria. When you write your introduction, does your reader know what your main question or topic is and what the 3 paragraphs of your essay will be about? When you write your paragraphs, can your reader identify the point? Is there an explanation and context? Have you provided the correct evidence to address the topic? And have you provided a link at the end? When you write your conclusion, have you stated what the main question or topic is and how each of the sub-questions or subtopics helped you to answer the main question or topic? And so here is an example of the rubric that your marker will be using. They will look at your knowledge of the event, the facts or evidence you have provided, the significance of the event, and an overall impression. When they look at your knowledge, they will see, is the knowledge excellent? Do you understand what you are writing about? Have you answered all the sub-questions correctly? If you haven't answered all of them, then you can't get a level 7 for knowledge. What evidence did you select? Was the evidence relevant, or did just you provide lots of facts hoping some of them would be right? Did you understand what you were writing about? Did you understand how significant the infantry was in the army? Or did you just list some facts and not really show a deeper understanding of the topic? And when your marker looks at the main impression, they will also consider the structure of your essay. They will take into consideration your introduction and your conclusion. They will determine if you have used the Peel method for each of your paragraphs and how well you answered this assessment under controlled conditions. Take time to pause the video, have a good look at this rubric, because if there's something you don't understand, it is important that you contact a tutor to go through some of it with you. And now you have come to the end of the video explaining extended writing. I have provided for you at the end of this video an example of a final essay. So I've taken all the topics we have discussed and the main topic, and I've put it into one essay for you. So you can see that in a final assessment, this is how your essay should look. You will see there are no subheadings. You will see that you will know what each paragraph is about as I state the point at the beginning. Take a careful look at my introduction and a careful look at the conclusion. Pause each page, read through it, and make sure that you are comfortable with the structure that you will need to write for your formal assessment. Please be aware that this essay is not the essay that you will be writing. This is just an example of the type of essay you could be getting. Good luck.